Hi, my name's Deacon AJ, and this week's saint is the Apostle St. Paul. You know, it's hard to think of a single person who's had a greater impact on the founding and the growth of the Christian church than St. Paul. He was originally known as Saul, and many of you know this story, and he was a Roman citizen and a Pharisee. He even presided over the persecution of Christians, and he was present at the stoning and martyrdom of St. Stephen. So he didn't start off as an apostle for sure, but he experienced a powerful vision and a conversion on the road to Damascus, another well-known story, and it caused him to convert to Christianity. He was baptized and he took the name Paul. So Saul becomes Paul and his Christian journey begins. He traveled all around the world. First he went to Arabia, and then he went back to Damascus. He also visited Jerusalem to see St. Peter, who was the first pope. During these travels, he preached ceaselessly, and he often drew criticism from those who didn't like his message, especially the Jews. They were really upset when they saw him converting Jews to Christianity. Eventually, he returned to Tarsus, where he was born, and he preached until he was called by Barnabas to come to Antioch. After he spent a year with the church there in Antioch, there was a famine in Jerusalem, and Paul and Barnabas were sent to Jerusalem with money for the famine victims. And this begins the church's well-established history of helping in relief. You know, when there's a famine in the world, or a hurricane, or any type of natural disaster like our fires just a couple weeks ago, the Catholic Church is always the first to respond. And so this began at the very beginning of the church. Paul and Barnabas went on a mission to Cyprus and went throughout Asia Minor. They established several churches there, and Paul remained in communication with them, and he wrote them letters giving them advice and helping them resolve disputes. Those letters that survive have become part of our Bible. So all the epistles, the letters of St. Paul, and we get to see this very common sense, down-to-earth recommendations and prescriptions that he had for these struggling churches. And as we read St. Paul's letters, we realize they struggled with the same things that we do. The same things that seem maybe so petty and so ridiculous, they struggled with them too. And St. Paul's letter is there for us just as it was for them. Paul was imprisoned during his travels, but he never stopped proclaiming the word of God. He eventually returned to Rome, and in 67 AD, he was martyred by the insane Emperor Nero. And according to St. John Chrysostom, they knew each other. Nero and Paul knew each other personally. But that's how his earthly life came to an end. St. Paul's the patron saint of many things: missionaries, evangelists, writers, journalists, authors, public workers, rope and saddle makers, and of course, tent makers, which was his lifetime vocation. His feast day is on June 29th, but what we're celebrating here on January 25th is the memorial of his conversion to Christianity, which, as I said at the beginning, who can imagine a church without St. Paul? So as we reflect on St. Paul, remember, this could be you. I mean, it's hard to think of a more rotten person than Saul. And look what God did. Look how God used him. Once he aligned his will with Christ, look how God used him. This could be you.